The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Did somebody here say something like nothing but sweeps in these NBA playoffs? It's one thing to be wrong. It's another to be loud wrong. And I'm not the only one. There are plenty of others, and they know much more about basketball than I'll ever know. But, yeah, we got 3 of the 4 that are going to go at least 6, and one of them that's going to go at least 5, and there may be some life left in the Cleveland Cavaliers, though I don't think so. But all of a sudden, we got some great finishes to these series as we head towards the Eastern and Western Finals early next week. Really, really exciting stuff and shocking. And I thought Charles Barkley got a little bit too defensive about that, and we'll deal with that later in the show. But I thought, he went on the information that he had available to him, and then he looked at it and he said, okay, he said, I think that based on what I saw in the first 2 games of that series, the defending champs are dead. The Denver Nuggets are not going to be able to win a game. This will be a sweep by Minnesota. And now it's 2-2, and we got Game 5 tonight, and the Nuggets are back on their home court where they're supposed to be a better team. They were not in the first 2 games of the series, but they have an opportunity tonight to take hold of the series again. And as Mike Malone said, he said, never underestimate the heart of a champion. And his team did show what it had going to Minnesota and winning those 2 games. So it was an opportunity for them to show that they are not to be counted out. And sometimes the defending champ takes it on the chin. They even go down for the 8 count, but they get up, get off the mat, and maybe they can come back tonight. We'll get into all of that. And also, we saw last night the Celtics take a stranglehold on the series, winning 109-102 in Cleveland with LeBron sitting courtside. LeBron is he's like America's guest for the NBA. He's a guy who can go wherever he wants to go, take a seat wherever he wants to sit, and he's royalty. Yeah, he plays for the Lakers. So what? He's from that area. He's from that part of the country. He delivered a championship to Cleveland. I guess that gives you a lifetime pass, too. If you deliver a championship to Cleveland, if you want to sit courtside for a Cavaliers game, even though you're not with the Cavaliers, Gegesund, go ahead. So he was sitting there. He also had a bottle of wine under his seat. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You're allowed to have drinks at courtside, but, bring your own bottle. That's what sometimes you do at a fancy restaurant. I guess the wine that they serve in Cleveland at the arena is not up to his standards, so he had his own wine to be able to enjoy the game last night. Also, Mike Florio and Chris Sims took a look at something that I'm going to deal with right now. And when it happened over the weekend, it's funny, and there are some really good reporters who cover the Commanders. People have been doing it a long time, like John Keim. He's been at it for like 30 years. Nikki Jhabvala does a great job with the Washington Post. Ben Standing. There are people who really do great work in covering this team. And I don't know whether they felt like there were so many other things to ask about with the rookie minicamp, but it didn't occur to one of them to ask Dan Quinn about the T-shirt that he was wearing. And it was a T-shirt that said Commanders on it. It had the W logo, but hanging from the left corner of the W was a pair of feathers, just like we used to have on the old helmets. And it is not a licensed T-shirt, not something that you can buy from the official fan shops of the team, not put out by Nike, not licensed, all that. It's illegal, basically. You can buy it online, but it's not something that certainly a person who's employed by the NFL, like Dan Quinn, should be wearing. And I'm sure there's been conversation with the league office about that. Hey, what's going on there? Now, initially you go, well, okay, maybe somebody sent it to him. He wasn't thinking. He put it on. He liked it. Not a big deal. But it is a big deal, and it's a big deal and an even bigger deal now with this story that was in the Post today from Sam Fortier, and it is maybe it's been reported by other outlets as well. But Senator Steve Daines, who's a Republican from Montana, intends to block legislation that would give the district greater control over the RFK Stadium site until the Washington Commanders honor a Native American family that helped design the former logo. So this is a state senator from Montana who's looking to hold up what could pave the way for the Commanders to go back to the District of Columbia and go back to the RFK site, which the stadium is supposed to be torn down sometime this summer, as they've been green-lighted to do that. And then, I think that's what most people want, is to have them back in the District of Columbia. And what has happened with the House is that they have approved legislation that would allow them to do the lease. As you know, the stadium is on federal land. And so the lease says it's not commercial property on there. It's just, the stadium and neighborhood. So they want to change the terms of the lease, extend it for 99 years, and allow for commercial construction around the area so you can have hotels and restaurants and so forth. And the House has said okay on that. The Senate has to say okay on that. Here comes a senator from Montana who wants to gum up the works. And he will call, it says here, for the Commanders officials to meet with the family of Walter Blackie Wetzel and members of the Blackfeet tribe. Wetzel is the one who created the profile of the Indian warrior that went on the helmet in 1972. Now, let me give you a little helmet history here. The helmet that I like the best was the one that they wore in the mid-'60s. I think they only wore it for 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. I think 65, 66, and 67. Maybe they wore it longer than that. Maybe through the 1969 season. So 65 through 69, they wore a helmet that had a spear on it. I always liked that look. I understand in today's world that can't happen. You can't have that. But they were the Redskins, and they had the helmet with the spear. And then Vince Lombardi became the coach in 1969. Lombardi, of course, had the classic helmets in Green Bay, the yellow helmets with the G and the circle around it. And Lombardi wanted to recreate that look in Washington. He was able to change the sleeves of the jersey to resemble what the Packers have in his first year, but I guess they needed a full year to get a new helmet in place. So he got the wheels in motion for the helmet that they wore for 2 years, 1971, 1972. It was a yellow helmet, just like they had in Green Bay, and it had an R with a circle around it, just like the G at Green Bay, except this one had feathers hanging off the R. A lot of people like that look. I always thought it looked stupid, and I was glad that they got rid of it in 1972 when Walter Blackie Wetzel designed a helmet that he said would represent the power of the team. And he got, George Allen to look at it. Allen approved it. And in time for the 1972 season, which was the year that they went to their first Super Bowl, they wore that helmet, and they wore it all the way through the 2000 season. Now, once they changed the name to Washington Football Team in time for the 2000 season, so they wore it up until the 2000 season, they had that helmet look, and it was iconic. It was part of the identification of the team. And then when they went to Washington Football Team, they just had the helmets with the numbers, the jersey numbers on the helmet. And then 2 years ago, when they went to Commanders, we had the W. And I'm okay with the W look. I'm not crazy about the name, but I think if that stays as the helmet, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that can become kind of a classic look. What they're asking for here, what the Senator Steve Daines is asking for, is not to change the name of the team. They're not calling for a name change, and they recognize that it's not going to go back to Redskins. They understand in this day and age this isn't going to happen. But what he's looking for is some recognition of the Wetzel family and what they did and what they contributed to the franchise. I personally think that's reasonable. I don't think that's an unusual thing, and I think that there should be some recognition of the history. I mean, look at the history of the team and what they accomplished with that logo. Between 1972 And the last year they wore it in 2019, never mind the last years of that under the Dan Snyder ownership, but between 1972 and 1992, so that 20-year period, when they went to their last Super Bowl and won and beat the Buffalo Bills for their third Super Bowl championship in 9 years and their fourth appearance that year in the NFC Championship game, and their fifth overall appearance in Super Bowls, I would say that represents the greatest era of Washington football, of Washington sports, for that matter. They won some championships early on with Sammy Baugh when they didn't have logos on helmets. They were just leather helmets. And they won the championship in Sammy Baugh's rookie year in 1937 and again in 1942. But the best period of time, the best era of Washington football was that 20-year period, 1972 to 1992. So there should be some recognition of that. I understand that Redskins and Native American imagery is a hot button. It's something that polarizes people. There are people who are fans of the Redskins, and they're never going to go back as long as they don't change the name, and they're not going to change the name back. But here's a senator which is taking up the cause of a family that's looking for something that I think is reasonable. Now, here's how he can hold things up, and here's how he can really create problems for what hopefully is a move ahead for the team to move back to the District of Columbia. The bill needs to pass the Senate for the stadium to become an option. And here's how he could hold it up, according to what Fortier has in the Post today. Majority Leader Charles Schumer usually will not consider bills on smaller individual matters. Such bills typically need either unanimous support so they can pass without needing a formal roll call vote, or be attached to a bigger bill in what's known as a policy rider. Thus, a lone senator, just one guy, one person, can block a unanimous vote. So even at the threat of objection is often enough to prevent leaders from trying to pass legislation. One guy can hold this up and could jeopardize it for this year. And the problem is they take a break next month, don't get back until September before the November election. So, it holds it up for another year. I've been told that a deal could be made this year, and that even that ground could be broken in the District of Columbia by the end of the year. If that happens, it's a 3-year process to build a stadium. Another year, more arguing, more legislation. Who knows what happens? Now, looks like the Commanders are going to be very cooperative in this. Yesterday, Commanders officials met with Ryan Wetzel, who is Blackie's grandson, and he put out a statement. We have spoken directly and are working collaboratively to recognize what they did in creating the logo, according to a Commanders spokesman. Ryan Wetzel called the meeting fantastic. So things look good. Now, one of the things he's asking for, and this could be an issue, one of the things he's asking for is, could they wear the old logo on the throwback jerseys? They've done that. They haven't done that in recent years, obviously, since they changed the name. But back when they were the Redskins and they would wear those throwback jerseys, I'm sure you've seen them with with basically no stripes on the jerseys, the dark burgundy, and they had the old Indian head logo on the sleeves of the jersey. They haven't had that since. He's asking for that. That could be an issue. He also is wondering about resuming merchandise sales with the old logo and using some of the proceeds to bring awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women and other tribal causes. So this now becomes a little bit of a slippery slope, too, because even though that would be for a great cause, it still would be something that many consider to be racist and is very, very polarizing, even in the Native American community, because there are those who are recognized as Indians and support the logo. And remember the Washington Post poll of some years ago, where they said that 9 out of 10 said they either supported the use of the name Redskins or had no problem with it. But the wheels changed, the direction changed, things changed really dramatically. I think with the George Floyd tragedy, I think that was a big moment in this country, and people began to recognize racism of all types at that time, and that's what helped to lead to the name change. Now, remember this. It's not that Dan Snyder got woke in 2020 and they changed the name. That's not what happened. He was going through some legal problems with the minority partners. He had used the pandemic to try and not pay them the dividend that they were due as partners. And so when that happened, they began to, look into selling their shares, looking to ways to create problems for him. And they knew the hardest way to hit him was to say, okay, Dan, you need to change the name. And Fred Smith, who was the chairman of FedEx, said, if you don't change the name, we're going to remove the logo and the naming rights from FedEx Field. And that's going to cost you a lot of money. And, oh, by the way, we've got Pepsi and Nike on board, so this is going to cost you a ton of money. So that's how that all came about. And Larry has fixed the machine, so we're going to give him a big round of applause, and it looks like we're going to be ready to go here. So thank you, Larry, for doing that. So that is a little bit of a background on that. And I would say, I don't know, but I would say that it looks like the new ownership is very much interested in satisfying them. And I can tell you from what I've heard, they're very interested in the history of this team. And they should be interested in the history of this team because here's why. There's a generation, maybe two, that was lost in the Dan Snyder ownership. I saw it firsthand with my kids. My kids are not fans of the team in the way that I was, for sure. And you also have to look at the way that that as fans, we celebrated the team, and they have been, seeing a generation of, oh, God, what a bum Dan Snyder is. It's just a different feel, a different way of how people look at the organization. So they need to recapture us. They need to recapture people 50-plus who grew up in the glory days of the team, of the days when they were winning Super Bowls. And so to connect with this and connect with the logo, it wouldn't take much. It would take a display at the stadium. That's all. That's all they have to do. And if they did have a museum in there, it would be a way of honoring that as well. So, I think this is something that's going to wind up being a good thing. I do. And I think that you should connect to the history of this team, and to pretend that they weren't the Redskins for as long as they were is wrong too. And, I would even go so far as to say to the fan base, you know what? You also had a racist who owned this team. And until 1962, it was an all-white team. So we don't want to celebrate the legacy of George Preston Marshall, but we want to recognize it because it's part of the team. Now, we've got everything fixed, so I want to play this for you. This was Mike Florio and Chris Sims on Pro Football Talk yesterday, and this was before this story came out. But they expressed some of the things that I expressed yesterday about it after watching this news conference with Dan Quinn wearing an unlicensed shirt with the team logo and the feathers off the side of the W, and whether or not this was actually a trial balloon, knowing that this was coming down the pipe. That knowing that Steve Daines, the senator from Montana, was threatening to hold up what is hopefully a smooth-running train to get the team back to the District of Columbia. And this was a way of running this up the flagpole to see what the reaction was when you had the new logo kind of mixed with the old logo of the feathers. So this was Florio and Sims yesterday on Pro Football Talk.
Dan Quinn shows up for practice on Saturday with an unlicensed Washington Commanders T-shirt that has the two feathers from the old logo, and that's not an accident. Those are the exact identical two feathers from the abandoned logo, and it's unlicensed. This is not something you can buy. This is not something the Commanders sell. This is not
the league. This is find him because if the player wore an unlicensed thing up to the thing, you're in trouble. Right.
Yeah, so there's two layers here, and I've asked the league, and the league hasn't gotten back to me yet. But this is something that the team will have to now expend legal capital to shut down, because anytime this is even mentioned now on social media, the bots go crazy trying to sell you this damn shirt. This damn shirt. All you got to do is click the link. The
right?
bots are everywhere.
Wow.
Oh, my God. It's unreal.
Damn.
It's unreal. And they're calling the Dan Quinn shirt.
Wow.
Now, my understanding is the team has no comment.
Yeah.
Team had no comment. Their position is they didn't know anything about it. That's my understanding. Like, they're not going to come out and say, we didn't know he was going to do this. He did this on his own. And I look at this very simply. Either he got the impression that it's okay to do this, that in the 3 months he's been with the team or thereabouts, he got the impression it's okay.
Right.
Or he got the impression it's not okay and he said, screw it, I'm doing it anyway. That doesn't seem like his style.
Right.
Or 3, he's just got his head up his ass and he's just not paying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of the 3.
Yeah, right.
And remember when Josh Harris bought the team, he used the old nickname a couple of times. Magic Johnson tweeted it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, are they sending out trial balloon here?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Dipping their
Daniel
toe in the
Snyder's
water.
gone, and maybe
Right.
we can bring back. Maybe the reason that name's gone, maybe the tipping point was they just decided they had enough
He's
Daniel
a
Snyder.
jerk, so
now
we
that he's
know-
gone,
yeah.
maybe, and,
Yeah.
you know, times have changed. They're putting, you know, Confederate names back on schools in Virginia again, which is just like, okay, where's the Mussolini school? I mean, where's the Hitler school? I mean, give me a break. I don't want to go down that route. I mean, we're going to win friends and influence people, not that way. But it's true.
Yeah.
So if the political realities are like shifting and they want to test the waters, this is a way to do it. Let's see what the reaction is to this. And we can say we didn't know anything about it, and let's just see what the reaction is to Dan Quinn wearing the T-shirt. I don't get the impression that that's what it was, but there are going to be people who think that's what it was.
Yeah, I was speculating yesterday that might be the case. There's due to be OTAs today, so I don't know if there's going to be media availability for Dan Quinn, but he's got to be asked about this because this has become a thing since Saturday. Seemed innocent. You know, somebody may have mailed him the T-shirt. He put it on. This is nice. Didn't realize the ramifications of it. The team has had no comment on it. So it's a bit of a thing. I should have mentioned this at the top of the 9 o'clock, but I was so famished with the technical issues we had. We have another game rolling out. You know, tomorrow we get the full schedule. Tomorrow night, the big hoo-ha with the big ceremony, and the NFL Network stretches it out for 2 hours of programming. We get the full schedule reveal tomorrow. We still don't know about a Commanders game. We know they're not going to be in the opening game of the season. That was announced yesterday that the Ravens are playing at Kansas City. We've known for several weeks that the Brazil game, this is the first ever in Brazil, the Friday night after opening night, which I guess would be the 7th of September, or the 6th, whatever it is, they will have the Green Bay Packers playing the Philadelphia Eagles. And then yesterday we got word that Dallas is going to open at Cleveland, and that's going to be the first Tom Brady game. That is going to be the game where the golden boy pipes his golden throats through the airwaves, and we get to hear the brilliance of Tom Brady. And they even rolled it out yesterday with this huge, big, I guess it was for sponsors, but they had all the people there. Michael Strahan was there, and Kevin Burkhardt, who's going to be the play-by-play guy, who's going to work with Brady, and Aaron Andrews, and the whole who-ha, left out of it was Greg Olson, who did a very good job. He's been kind of kicked to the curb there. But this was, bright lights, Hollywood, the whole spiel with Michael Strahan introducing the golden boy and what's going to be his first game.
For the first time in 5 years, the NFL on Fox opens with the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be your first game. And also another thing, week 1 is back to being an exclusive doubleheader window for Fox. So how do you like that news? You get to the Cowboys first week.
Amazing. Obviously, having the Cowboys on is a huge draw. As America's team, that's going to get a little hard for me to say that all the time. I understand they were the competition for a long time. But in this new role, I know the Cowboys, how important they are to this network. They got great storylines. Come on, Dak Prescott, let's see if he can finally come through. One of the great defensive players. Did that just slip out? Micah Parsons, what a great player he is, and Coach McCarthy. So I love covering them. I've been obviously going against them for a long time, and now I get to tell everyone how great they are.
Oh, I already like what you're doing, man. I already like it.
Oh, boy, the big smooch fest there. He took a little bit of a shot at Dak Prescott, finally come through. That's facts. He's never played in an NFC championship game. I mean, that's considered to be big criticism? Hoo-ah! Oh, it's Tom Brady. Tom Brady said that. Also, they've set him up. Boy, talk about, serving him up a 3-0 fastball. His first game is going to be the Cowboys. The Cowboys sitting around and picking their teeth is going to draw ratings. So it's automatically going to be a huge number. I don't even know why they waste the Cowboys there. Why, if you're going to have Tom Brady, who's going to draw interest anyway, it's very unusual for an analyst to get this much interest. Why not just put on a run-of-the-mill game? Why burn the Cowboys in that spot? But they're doing that. Also, it was announced today that the first Monday night game is going to be the Jets at San Francisco. And my first thought was, and I don't know what your first thought was or is now if you're hearing this for the first time, but, really? Aaron Rodgers back on Monday Night Football, where his season last year lasted exactly 4 plays? He's going back to Monday Night Football? I know it's not in New York. And I know, the chances of him tearing his Achilles again on Monday Night Football are slim. But Washington once had a player named Junior Gillette. Tore his Achilles, rehabbed, came back, was getting ready for the start of training camp, tore it again. So if he's going to tore the other one, so tore the other Achilles. You don't wish that on Aaron Rodgers. But, oh boy, if that happens again on Monday Night Football, ay. So here's your first weekend of marquee games. The opening night, Thursday night, Ravens at Kansas City. Friday night, Green Bay, Philadelphia in Brazil. Sunday afternoon, Dallas at Cleveland in the 4 o'clock window on Fox. And then Monday Night Football, Jets at San Francisco. Oh, boy. Coming up, we've got Will Dawkins. I didn't get to this yesterday. React from the draft lottery and what they might do with the number 2 pick. It's nothing to get really too excited about, but Dawkins has some speculation on that. And also, Tony and Mike have a look at Game 5 between the Knicks and the Pacers tonight. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Mike Cal is in for Tony today at 11 o'clock. I've said this for several days now. There's no other league in sports that can do what the NFL can do with the schedule. Drip, drip, drip. Get people excited. Hey, what's it going to be? We know now 4 of the 5 marquee games to open up the weekend. Big announcement today. The Monday night opener has, yes, Aaron Rodgers back to the hair that bit him. Monday Night Football, where his season started last year and lasted exactly 4 plays. They're not at home, but they're on the road at San Francisco, where he grew up and where he played college football back in the Bay Area. So he's going to get a restart, the mulligan on his career with the Jets, and hopefully it lasts more than 4 plays as they take on the defending NFC champions on Monday Night Football. So the only hole now for marquee games opening weekend is Sunday night. And I saw some speculation. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I saw speculation. How about the Giants and Commanders? Got the New York audience Sunday night. Interest in Jaden Daniels. Do you put him out there? Is he going to be the starting quarterback in that game? That might be a possibility. And I also saw something the other day, again, not set in stone, but that there's reason to believe that the Commanders are going to go back to Dallas again on Thanksgiving, that they're very happy with the ratings from that. And now the teams play all the time on different days of the week. What's the big deal? Okay, you have to go on the road for a Thursday game. Well, so what? That's the way things roll in the NFL. Used to be that the only Thursday games of the year were the 2 Thanksgiving games. The Lions hosting the early game, the Cowboys hosting the second. That was it. Then we had Monday Night Football starts to dribble in the 70s. Then we had Sunday Night Football, and now once the season's over, we got Saturday games, and even on Christmas, they've got 2 games on a Wednesday this year. And by the way, hold your horses on Netflix, because the latest is not necessarily does Netflix get those 2 games on Christmas. Now it may wind up on Amazon. I guess the NFL is trying to get a bidding war going, and it's probably coming down to the wire because the full schedule is coming out tomorrow night. It's tomorrow night. By tomorrow, we will finally know when we know who's playing who and where they're playing. We just don't know when they're playing, on what days and what times. So at least we have now the first weekend opening game. Ravens play at Kansas City Thursday night. Friday night, first game in Brazil, Green Bay and Philadelphia. Then it's Dallas at Cleveland, the first prime Sunday afternoon game, the Tom Brady game. It's. I think this is a first, even though John Madden and maybe a handful of others have made noise as analysts. There seems to be more hype for Brady doing this game than the actual game itself. And having the Cowboys for his first game, boy, are they serving up some nice supper for him, because that is a ratings-proof game. As long as you have the Cowboys involved and in a 4 o'clock window, I could be doing the color, and it could draw an enormous number. So Tom Brady is going to be off to a flying start with his new team on Fox, and they had this big hoo-ha rollout yesterday. All right, back to basketball, and we got Game 5 tonight between the Knicks and the Pacers, and things have taken a big turn with the series going to Indiana over the weekend, and the Pacers just destroying the Knicks on Sunday, and now it's back at Madison Square Garden tonight. Maybe the Knicks have some life, or maybe not. Tony and Mike kicking that around yesterday on PTI.
Both teams have won all 4 games at home. So, Tony, how should the Knicks feel about the state of things with this series heading back to Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, for Game 5?
The Knicks starters should all check into Mount Sinai Hospital on the Upper East Side and request intravenous fluid, not just 1 bag, but 5 bags each, because Tom Thibodeau is going to play them 48 minutes. That's what he's going to do. I mean, let me just check the notes here. Yeah, Game 5 is a must-win for them. It's not a must-win for Indiana. It's a must-win for the Knicks. This series has the feel of a series that Game 5 will be the decisive game. And if the Knicks win Game 5, they have 3 days to rest. Carlisle is no dope. He watched Jalen Brunson torch him in Games 1 and 2. So now he's covering Jalen Brunson 94 feet. And he's wearing him out. Jalen Brunson had 10 different front rim shots in Games 3 and 4. He had a bad game yesterday. He had 18 points, 6 for 17 from the field, 0 for 5 from 3, and he'd been routinely scoring 40 points. I think he was minus 26 when he was out there. DiVincenzo was minus 40 when he was out there. That's a tired team. They got beat up because they can't take that pace right now.
Tony, they were toast. They were going to be toast. I mean, they almost pulled out Game 3 miraculously. What an effort. Listen, I don't say this very often, but I admire these Knicks and the way they play, and particularly the 3 players that we talked about, the whole squad, but particularly those 3. But they could not summon that yesterday. And I didn't think in the pregame, and I said publicly on the air that I thought that Indiana would win and win easily because the Knicks would not be able to summon that again. Look, come on now. There's some human limits to what the human body can summon. And the Knicks, I thought, had met that limit. Now, I'm with you, Tony. They go back to Madison Square Garden for Game 5. And Madison Square Garden, I mean, I've seen it have, sort of healing prospects on the Knicks in the past. And I've seen it happen. I've sat there in playoff games, and you have too. When you thought the Knicks were dead in the water, they go back to Madison Square Garden and they find something. Well, they better find it in Game 5. I'm with you on that.
Well, again, they can get an extra day's rest if they win Game 5. What they've got going for them right now is that Indiana is not a good road team. They're 1-4 in the playoffs on the road. Yeah. And because of the fact that the Knicks are higher seeded, Indiana has to win 1 game on the road.
Have to win.
They have to.
That's right.
And that could be tonight. If they do, I kind of like the Pacers' chances to win the series in 6, but we'll see. 3 of the 4 series going at least 6, 1 of them going at least 5. Looks like the Celtics have the upper hand as they won again last night in Cleveland. But, we've changed our minds, haven't we, as these series have gone on. Meantime, we've got the draft combine, which is going on in Chicago now, and they're taking a look at the draft prospects. Again, a big yawn over the weekend, right? With the lottery, even though the Wizards wound up with the number 2 pick, this is a draft where you go, Okay, well, who are they going to take? And these names probably aren't going to excite you. They're names like Donovan Clingan, okay, the big man from the Huskies, from the UConn, back-to-back champions. He didn't play that much the year before. He's big. You can't teach height. He's 7'2", but can 7'2" guys play in the NBA anymore? Would they take him at number 2? There's names that you have no familiarity with. Alex Sarr, his name has been mentioned as maybe the top pick, which would go to the Atlanta Hawks. He's from Perth, and he's also 7'1", a string bean, 217 pounds. And then foreign players. It's changed a lot. It's not like you've watched these 4-year superstars in the NBA, and the days of, it was a mistake, obviously, but the days where Michael Jordan goes number 3 and everybody goes, yeah, that kind of makes some sense. Hakeem Olajuwon, he's a big man. He's the best player, and you got to have a big man to win. And even though Sam Bowie's had all these problems with broken legs, we're going to take a shot on him. And you've heard all 3 coming out. Well, that's ancient history. Now, you heard a lot about Victor Wembanyama, obviously, last year, only because he was this freak of nature, and he got a lot of hype from the various networks. But beyond that, this year, it's a foreign influence, and it's a lot of, pretty good college players, nobody really to knock your socks off. And we'll see what happens. But Will Dawkins was at the draft lottery on Sunday. They had Bilal Coulibaly up on the set. And by the way, not very well promoted. I didn't know that this was at noon on Sunday. I came home from Mother's Day brunch, and I thought I'd watch it, later in the afternoon. No, it already happened. I checked on my phone. Oh, Wizards got the number 2 pick. Okay. Yawn. Oh, Atlanta got the number 1. Oh, that's kind of a surprise. Oh, Detroit got screwed. They had the worst record, and they wound up 5th. Well, that's the way it goes. So this was Will Dawkins, the GM of the Wizards, talking to reporters on Sunday afternoon after they landed the number 2 pick. And what's next as they head for the draft lottery, which is taking place where the lottery draft combine, taking place in Chicago, where the draft lottery took place.
We call this like the information gathering combine week, where we'll get in front of over 30 players, really get to interview them, spend some time with them, and then obviously watch them compete on the court in the afternoons and the evenings. So long days, but hopefully really, really productive ones.
What do you try to glean from those interview sessions?
Who they are, what they're about, if they're a fit for us, if we're a fit for them. Those are the things that are most important, but they're just introductory conversations. So hopefully we get them in DC and get to spend more time with them. But you really got to find out what's under the hood, what makes them tick, and if we're good fits for each other.
How much does the draft board change from like the lottery and the combine to draft night?
I don't think we've created it yet. It's just always a work in progress. Once we get it to a spot where we feel comfortable with, it's probably a day, 2 days before the draft, because it's always shifting and moving, and you're always just gaining more information. But this is a deeper draft. I think there's a lot of players that we can find that fit and will help us moving forward. So it'll be shifting for a while.
That's euphemism. Deeper draft for crapola draft. This is more from Dawkins. He's been at this for a while, worked in Oklahoma City, and has some experience in this and what he's learned from this whole draft process.
You're probably wrong. That's what I've learned. And then you got to work with a lot of good people to make sure you try to make the most informed decision possible. There's a lot of guesswork that goes into everything, but you got to make sure that you look at the eyes, you look at the ears, the intel you're getting, you use the analytics and the numbers, and you lose the interview process, and you put it all together. You can't just make one decision based on what you see. Everything's got to make the most sense. So we'll do what we can, get as much information as we can by June 26th. 2-night draft, so that'll be interesting how we go around the second round and try to find new advantages for that too. So we're always learning, always developing, and we'll do what's best for the Wizards at the end of the day.
Yeah, going to a 2-night draft. Ridiculous. Only 2 rounds are going to do it in 2 nights. You can't get that done in 1 night. And how many of these second rounders make it? I know they do once in a while. I know from time to time. And Jalen Brunson was a second rounder. I understand that. But to stretch it out over 2 nights. And again, it's the whole thing has changed with the draft. You don't know the players. There's very few of the ones that we watched in the NCAA tournament that are going to be, factors in this draft. You got guys from the G League. You got guys who played in Europe. And that is the way the talent is, as they say, procured. But this is Will Dawkins selling what they got here to the fan base in that, okay, we may not have an impact player, but be patient. down the road, we may have something.
There's a lot of optionality at the top of the draft, and there's probably not the same level of instant gratification that you can see in year one with some of these rookies, but if you really dive down and have some patience and have a forward-thinking outlook, these players are going to be pretty good players in the NBA a few years from now.
You said like meeting with 30 guys. I mean, how many do you think would be in consideration at number 2?
At number 2, there's probably 10 guys that you're spending time with here. You're like, hey, I can really evaluate him and really get to know him and then be able to make a better decision. But we also have the 26th pick in the draft, and opportunities will probably come and arise, or we can move up, move back, do whatever we need to do. But strategically, we just need to learn who they are as people and then find the best ways to go up and get them.
So that's what's going on the next couple of days. Most intriguing part of this combine is Bronny James. Bronny James, who sadly had that cardiac incident in August. Thank God his life was saved. And he played at USC this past year. Now, these are not numbers that you usually come into the NBA with out of college. He averaged 4.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 2.1 assists. Less than 5 points a game, less than 3 rebounds a game, 2 assists. Not dazzling numbers, but the complication of the dad, LeBron, who wants to play with the son. And the Lakers have the 17th overall pick. They also have a pick late in the second round. And according to latest speculation, there seems to be a pretty good chance that the Lakers are going to take him. The odds are set at this. FanDuel says the Lakers are plus 185 to draft Bronny. The next shortest odds are the Knicks at 1,400. So they're the favorites to draft him. And here's the thing about the 17th pick. You probably don't need to use that to take him, but are other teams going to take Bronny knowing that LeBron has decided he wants to play with the son? I think LeBron has sort of backed away from that, maybe from a negotiating standpoint. Like, he does, we got to have Bronny. I'll do anything it takes. Here's Anthony Davis. Do that. But, something like that. So that could be a complicating factor here. Is he an NBA prospect? He's listed at 6'4". He may be smaller than that. He's going to be measured at the combine, so we'll get an accurate number on that. But that is not a guy who would normally be a prospect except for the extenuating circumstances of his dad. Although Adrian Wojnarowski on ESPN last night said the people he's talked to and what he's heard about Bronny, he could actually be an NBA player.
NBA teams have seen a good deal of Bronny James. Go back a year to the Nike Hoop Summit in Portland. I was there, saw him in those practice sessions. It was full of NBA executives. They saw him practice. They saw him play in a game. And he played well there. He looked like a legitimate prospect in his draft class. But he missed 5 months after the heart episode. And certainly that impacted his season. But he's got a chance here, not just at the combine over the next few days. He's scheduled tonight to get out on the court in agility and shooting like dozens of other players have today. But then to do individual workouts with teams. He's got a decent period of time here to show teams his impact. Remember, Bronny James is going to have an impact for organizations, not just on the basketball side, but potentially on the business side. He's almost assuredly going to start in the G League. He will pack G League arenas, merchandising, all of those make him an attractive player, whether it's late first round or second round. So I think certainly his opportunity to play in the NBA is there.
So Woj is saying that Bronny James could have the same impact on the G League that Caitlin Clark is having on the WNBA. Maybe, and maybe that's worth it for teams to do that. I don't think there's ever been anything like this before. Like, for example, Ken Griffey Jr., when he came out in the draft, I think he was drafted in 1989 by Seattle. His father was a really good player and still with some prime years left in his career. Maybe not prime years, but still a productive player in Major League Baseball. Not anywhere near the impact of LeBron James where he could say, oh, yeah, you got to get me with my son. Ultimately, it happened, and we had probably the most famous father-son moment in sports history when they both wound up in Seattle with Ken Griffey Sr. playing the last year of his career, and they hit back-to-back home runs. That was really cool. But there wasn't any of this. Now we got the most famous player in the NBA, someone who's in the discussion as the greatest ever. I don't think he is, but some think he is, who's saying, I want to play with my son. I've done a lot of different things in my 20 years in the NBA. I changed the way teams are put together. When I took my talents to South Beach and we won a couple of titles with the Heat, I came back to Cleveland, took care of unfinished business, delivered a title for them, went to Los Angeles, delivered the Lakers a title, and now, the last thing I want to cap it off with playing with my son. And the question is, how much are teams going to use that maybe as a ransom situation? Oh, you want your son? Here's what you're going to have to give up. Or do teams look at it and say, yeah, he's really not an NBA player. We'll get some people into our G League games, but the gyms only seat like 4,000 or 5,000. So there are a lot of things that have to be considered. But there hasn't been, as far as I can remember, anything like this. And it's never happened in the NFL. I don't think it's ever really come close where we've had a player who came out of college when his father was still active in the NFL. I guess it could happen. Tom Brady, he played till he was 45 years old. If he had a kid when he was a rookie, the kid could have possibly played with him with the Patriots, but that didn't happen. And it's happened in baseball. It's never happened in the NBA. And as this saga unfolds, and the speculation is that Bronny is not going back to college, that we could have father-son together. What happens between now and then, that's going to be most interesting to watch. Do the Lakers go as far as to take him at number 17? Do they gamble down the road? They can get him at the end of the draft in the second round. Do they try and make a deal with another team when they see him on the board and think maybe he's going to be taken? When they trade up to get it? All kinds of things can happen. We got a month before it happens, over a month. It's the end of next month for the draft. But I don't think we've ever seen anything like it, and we may never see it again. We may never see anything like that again. 52 years ago today, Willie Mays with a bang in his return to the Big Apple. That's next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Mike Caller's in for Tony at 11 o'clock. I don't think you would get much of an argument. Yeah, you might, with maybe the Babe Ruth people chiming in. But the best baseball player of all time, certainly the greatest living baseball player, is Willie Mays. He didn't hit as many home runs as Babe Ruth. Maybe didn't quite create the sensation that Ruth did, but Willie Mays, man, when baseball was king, it's hard to believe this, but baseball was bigger than the NFL at one time. It really was. And when Willie Mays played in the 1950s and through the 1960s, it was. And he maybe was the most famous athlete on the planet at that time. And he retired after the 1973 season. I think he played like 22 years in the majors and was beloved. And nobody played the outfield like he did. He could run, he could throw, he could run the bases as well as anyone and hit for power, hit for average, could bunt. I mean, there wasn't anything that Willie Mays couldn't do. And so at the end of his career, and it's interesting how this all unfolded, he came up with the New York Giants in 1951. And he got off to a slow start, wanted to quit baseball. Leo DeRocher, the manager, he called him Mr. Leo, put his arm around him and said, "Kid, I'm sticking with you as my center fielder." And he thrived in that 1951 season, which included the shot heard round the world, the Bobby Thompson home run. Willie Mays, by the way, was on deck for that. He hit .274 with 20 home runs, 68 runs batted in 121 games. 1952, he went into the Army, and he only played 34 games for the Giants in 52. He missed all of 53. So those were like 2 prime years completely eliminated from his career. He played 3 more years with the Giants. 1954 was when he had that great catch off Vic Wertz at the Polo Grounds in the World Series, and the Giants swept the Cleveland Indians. That was the only World Series championship that Willie Mays ever got. He got back to the World Series, got back in 62 with the Giants. They lost to the Yankees. And in his final year, 73, with the Mets, they lost to the A's, and that was the end of his career. And I think, sadly, he's too well remembered for this, because this wasn't representative of what his career was like. But people talk about Willie Mays falling down in the outfield. He was 42 years old, and he was playing center field for the Mets in the World Series, and everybody saw it at a time when relatively few baseball games were televised. He fell down. He slipped. Nobody could have ever imagined Willie Mays falling down in the outfield, but it's become sort of a phrase for when things go downhill for you, kind of like jumping the shark, Willie Mays falling in the outfield. But the reality is he played pretty well in that World Series. He hit .286. He had some big hits. He played 3 games in that series for them. And people forget the contributions he made in helping to get it to 7 games. They lost in 7, but he helped to get them there. And, his career includes only 1 World Series championship. But the other part of this story is the love affair that he had with New York and New York had with him. He played through the 1957 season with the Giants in New York, and that led to, later on the Terry Cashman song, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. They were the 3 famous center fielders for the 3 teams in the 1950s in New York, a very romantic period for baseball. But then the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles for the 58 season, and the Giants went with him. So he left after, what should have been a 6-year run with the Giants, but really was only 4 seasons because he missed most of 52 and all of 53, and had most of the Hall of Fame career with the Giants. Well, he was over 40 years old, and Giants weren't really doing much, and he wasn't hitting very well for the Giants, and they wanted to do Willie a solid. He was 41 years old. And so on May 11th, the Giants traded him to the Mets for Charlie Williams, a relief pitcher, and $50,000. When he got to the Mets, number 24 was worn by Jim Beauchamp, who had the presence of mind to say, no, that's Willie's number. We're going to give it to Willie. So he's wearing 24. And here's how, maybe the gods line up. He's traded May 11th. His first game for the Mets is May 14th. It's Mother's Day. Who are they playing? Why, they're playing the San Francisco Giants, of all teams. His debut for the Mets back in New York after all those years. What is it now? 15 years later, 1952, he left, 1972, he left in 57. So 15 years later, after all those great years with the Giants, he's back in New York, comes to the plate with a runner on, and this is Bob Murphy at the microphone for WHN Radio.
Payoff pitch to Mays. And it's way back in left field. It could be. It's going, and it is a home run. A home run for Willie Mays. Number 647 in his career.
Welcome the applause, of course.
From the crowd and in the dugout from the Mets as he belted a 3-2 pitch over the left field wall. It puts the Mets out in front by a score of 5-4. The 647th home run of Mays' career, his first of this season.
How about that? He would hit 13 more, 660 for his career. He played 69 games for the Mets in 72, hit 267 with 8 home runs, and then played 66 more games in 1973 at the age of 42. Didn't hit for average, hit 211, but hit 6 home runs. And again, I played well in the World Series other than the play that I guess sadly he's remembered for falling down in the outfield. But what a moment it was 52 years ago, Mother's Day, making his debut for the Mets, and he hits a 2-run homer to help them win the game. Really cool. And this was a really cool story to wrap things up. The class of 2024 in college didn't have the senior year that they wanted in high school because, the pandemic hit in March and it wiped out just about everything for them. Wiped out the prom, it wiped out graduation. In fact, one of the saddest things I can remember from the pandemic, the gym was closed, so I would go and take a long walk in the afternoon. And I was walking past Northwest High School, which is near my house, in an afternoon, and I heard the procession, the recording, dun, 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 and I see this line of cars. And in the cars were parents and graduates wearing masks, sticking their hand out the window to accept a diploma that was being handed out by someone else with a mask. That was their graduation ceremony. In some cases, the school had the following year, they invited the kids back, but it wasn't the same. So they did something in Maryland last Friday, which is really cool. The seniors threw a prom, and they threw it in the Stamp Student Union, and they said about 500 people there in tuxedos and gowns and things like that. And this was the prom that they were cheated out of 4 years earlier. And it was an opportunity for them to experience something that they did not get to experience in high school. Maybe they were able to talk to their prom dates on Zoom and kind of, cry together that they weren't able to have that. And, seeing my kids go through it and what it meant to them and how cool it was, where the parents show up and they take the pictures and all that. Maybe they didn't have the parents show up in Maryland, but they had their prom. So that was a nice thing, a nice little recapping of a college career that should have had the wrap up that a high school career had, and at least it was a little bit of a make good on that. And just in case you have not heard, we got the first part of the schedule. We'll get the rest of it tomorrow night, but the last little piece coming in today, the first Monday night game, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets go to San Francisco on Monday night. The Sunday primetime afternoon game, still lead the night game, the Sunday night game, but it's Dallas at Cleveland on Fox with Tom Brady making his debut. The Friday night game will be the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles in Brazil, and then the opening game, which will be the first Thursday in September, will be in Kansas City, the defending champs opening up against the Baltimore Ravens in a rematch of the AFC Championship game. Again, no sport creating more excitement over a schedule than the NFL. Caitlin Clark debuted tonight. It'd be interesting the number they get up against. They are starting the Knicks Pacers game at 8. This will be at 7:30, so they get a little jump on that. We'll see what the number is, but there's never been excitement for a WNBA opener like this one. And the Mystics get started tonight as well as they take on the New York Liberty at home. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, hopefully with no technical problems. Callow is in for Tony next. Don't go away.